and then realized it wasn't working out. And me being also kind of naive was like, well, you know, if they basically were selling it for nothing. We would just had to assume the lease. And I said, well, you know, I'm way smarter than these guys, so this sounds like a no-brainer. No cost to get into it. We'll just come in, learn, run it, and it'll be a home run. But it didn't work out that way. We realized quickly this Samurai Sam's was probably more like a business crowd lunch type place. The average lunch price would be $7 or $8, and this is in a time where you know, this is on 9th East in Provo, just surrounded by all college students, and there's Taco Bell across the street, right, where you can get a full meal for $2.50. And so I realized quickly it wasn't that they were dumb; it was that this was the wrong location for this type of business. And we tried a lot of different things, and honestly, I always tell people I learned more from that year running that thing into the ground than I did from the MBA program. And so that was kind of the start. But at that time, while I was going to school at BYU at the MBA program, I met a buddy. Actually, he lived across the hallway in a condo unit that we'd each purchased at the time, and his name was Jason Johnson. We became friends. I was single at the time. He moved in with his wife that they'd kind of just gotten married, and then I got married. And so as couples, we would get together every night, play board games, and just, you know, kind of college life, but just and just really enjoyed that friendship. And that was probably a couple of years while we were both finishing the MBA program. So he graduated. We both graduated. He went to work for HP in Roseville. But while he was in the MBA program at BYU, his father-in-law, anybody from Portland, Oregon? No? In Portland, there was a chain of car washes. And at this time, I mean, there weren't car wash chains like there are today. There were very few car wash chains anywhere in the country. If to give you an example, when we got to 6 locations, we were now on the list of the top 50 car wash chains in the country. It was just 6 locations. It was really fragmented. Mom and pop owners everywhere, sometimes multi-generational. Like, yeah, grandpa had a car wash, now the son has a car wash, and it just passed it on. But rarely really looking at growing it. And for a lot of different reasons. Some of it was that most of them were full service car washes with 50 or 60 employees, and that's not really scalable, right? It's like, you know, it's not repeatable or easily certainly not franchisable. And so, but there was a car wash in Portland called KD Car Wash, and my business partner now, my friend Jason Johnson, his father-in-law was retiring from Portland to St. George. And he said, he got to St. George and he's like, well, there's no car wash here like there is in Portland. And so he went to he's kind of entrepreneurial. He went to the owner of the KD Car Washes. There was probably 10 of them in Portland, which at the time was like one of the largest car wash companies in the world with 10 locations. And so he went to this guy, Chuck Cady, and said, I want a franchise. I want to open a KD Car Wash in St. George, Utah. And Chuck was like, no, yeah, like not interested. But Chuck had just started a soap company. But, you know, at 10 locations now, he's looking at his economies of scale and saying, not only can I demand a lower price on soap, I can now make my own soap. And so he started making his own soap. And so he said, if you start a car wash in St. George and buy my soap, I will tell you everything you want to know. I'll tell you everything you know. I'll teach you how to start a car wash. And so between that and then in business school, my business partner and friend Jason Johnson, he did a business plan project in one of his classes that he took he took this business plan to help his father-in-law start a car wash in St. George, Utah. And then we graduated. He went to work at HP. Flash forward 5 years, then I was doing kind of the .com stuff here. I actually went after the .com bubble burst. I went and did some real estate stuff. They're still around here, Fieldstone Homes. I worked for Fieldstone Homes for just a short period of time. And then Jason was ready to leave HP. He was kind of done with like the corporate ladder. He didn't really see himself as staying there and doing that for a career. And he was much more entrepreneurial. Looked around Sacramento and said, there's not really that many car washes here in Sacramento. And so that's kind of what led him to approach me. He had watched me go through that Samurai Sam's failure, but also saw that I was doing that while I was going to school full time and working a job, or working full time and going to school part time. And he knew my passion for marketing. And I don't know if he thought I was good at it. He just knew that he wasn't a marketing guy. He was a finance guy and accounting and strategy guy. And besides, we were like just kind of like best friends. And so he invited us to come to California. He found 3 other guys that were already in a business they had done an appraisal business and then got into self-storage units. And so the 3 of them partnered with the 2 of us, and the 5 of us, Jason and I, with doing our sweat portion, and them financing our first acquisition. We bought 2 locations in Sacramento, and Jason ran one of them and I ran the other one. And that's how we started in the car wash business. So I'm a big fan of acquisition. What do they call it? Entrepreneurship by acquisition. Because really, sometimes if you don't have a business plan, if you don't have an idea, there's nothing right. But you feel like, I don't want to really work for somebody else, which is a legitimate feeling. I know Corbin and I don't preach the same story on this one, because he's like, you don't need to ever go work for somebody, just go start your thing and go do it. But I think there's some value. Like if I think I want to learn a business, there's nothing wrong with going to work in that business for a year or 2 and really learning it. And you may even be such the kind of entrepreneurial spirit in that business that you'll knock the socks off of everybody else as you're there punching a clock, and you'll set yourself, all of a sudden now either that business is going to value you and bring you in and give you equity or make you a partner. And I'm not saying overnight, or you'll learn everything you need to know. You'll see what you do and don't want to do in that and go do it yourself. So we bought 2 car washes and we made lots of mistakes. And the one thing I wanted to talk about today a little bit was culture, because I get a lot of two questions I get a lot is what sets Quick Quack apart from everything else, and if you were going to do something different from day one, what would you do? And it's the same answer, and it's all around culture. But I'll finish the quick history story. Then we didn't start as Quick Quack Car Wash. We started because the car wash we bought was called Splash and Dash Car Wash in Sacramento. And if you've heard that name, it's probably because there's a Splash and Dash Car Wash in every city in America. So at the time, we thought we had enlisted the help of a lawyer to secure the naming rights for Quick Quack Car Wash, and he told us we had, but we weren't smart enough to know if that was true or not. But when we went to we ended up with 6 locations. We bought the 2 and then built 4 immediately because we knew we wanted to grow and have a brand. It was something that not a lot of people had done at the time. And we started, so we had those 6 locations, but we were not profitable. We were not succeeding very well. But we knew that there were places that were, so we didn't know exactly why we weren't having the success that we thought we would, the growth that we anticipated. So we started talking to different car wash operators in different parts of the country and trying to, at the time, and still a little bit the case, surprising to us, the car wash industry, probably because of this mom and pop kind of culture, they were willing to share without really any reason. If we said we're in Sacramento and they're in Amarillo, Texas, they didn't see us as competition, and so they probably thought we were equally kind of like, we'll tell you what works for us and you tell us what works for you. So there was probably some of that. I feel like early on we were the ones just getting all the good information. We weren't really sharing much, but then eventually we did. And but that's how we ended up. We knew that one of the problems we had in Sacramento was the weather pattern. So this is pre memberships. There was no such thing as a car wash membership, right? This was the data showed, because we didn't really know, but the industry data, because we didn't have data, the industry showed that people were washing their cars once or twice a year. And that felt right to us, because Jason and I had never washed our cars, ever, as college students. And, when you talk to people, it's like, yeah, I wash my car in the driveway, if once a week, maybe. Most people wash their car in the driveway probably once a month. But if they're going to go to a professional car wash, it's once or twice a year. And, I'm going to treat my car to a special treat, because maybe this car wash place will do something better than I'm doing right at home. So the problem in Sacramento was if they were going to wash their car once or twice a year, it was not going to be between October and April, because that was the rainy season. And there's no way they were going to, risk going to the car wash and have it raining the next day or week if they're only going to wash it. Yeah, more like September. Yeah, it could be September. Exactly. So that was part of our problem. We're like, we knew, our partners had trust in us. I'm not sure why, but we knew we had some stuff to figure out. But we still believed in the car wash model. But we said, if we're going to grow more, we're not going to grow right now in Sacramento. We need to get a weather pattern, find a different weather pattern somewhere that has snow, because we'd done our homework and we saw that in our business in Sacramento, we absolutely were not making money in the wintertime. But in car washes in places with snow, they were more steady year round, if not a little bit higher in the wintertime, depending on the snow and everything. So in Amarillo, Texas, whether you've been there or not, and you may not know that it actually snows in Amarillo, Texas, but there was a chain of car washes that the owner there had started 3 in Amarillo, then moved, they expanded to Lubbock, where they put 3 in, and then this owner had, because 3 in Amarillo, that at the time felt like you got this place covered. And same with Lubbock. Those two cities are kind of 2 hours apart and kind of merged together a little bit, like Salt Lake and Provo. But then he was kind of retiring, but he moved to Colorado Springs, which is kind of just up the road, which geographically I didn't understand, but about a 6-hour drive probably. And he then put 1 Quick Quack in Colorado Springs. He had plans to kind of probably put a couple more, kind of like he had just done, 3, but that's when we found him, when we were trying to say, hey, and he was one of the first in the country to be modeling this unlimited car wash model. And at the time it was $12.95 a month, unlimited car washes, big billboards everywhere, and kind of just crushing it, honestly. But he was an older guy. He had done made his first company in, also in storage. And so my partners and him, they had this storage connection and just kind of hit it off, and we're picking his brain. And then he's like, why don't you just buy my company? Like, I'm kind of not interested in doing this anymore. I was going to do a couple more in Colorado Springs, but why don't you just take this over? So that's how we ended up with Quack Car Wash. He sold, we joked that it was 2007. We joked that it was the last transaction that happened before the recession of 2008. And if it hadn't, I don't know that I'd be sitting here talking to you, because it was, they were making money. And so through the recession, which was another very helpful discovery, was that we weren't sure people would watch, if people have to choose between their cable subscription or their groceries and car washing, somewhere we're not going to make the cut. But it was remarkably recession-proof. Like, we did not grow very much during the recession, but we also didn't decline, which was a fascinating discovery and led down the road to us being able to really attract outside capital from private equity. Was that we could kind of claim to be recession-proof, which was true. I mean, we just proven it out. So we bought Quick Quack. We had Splash and Dash. We had 2 companies, 2 brands, and besides the fact that we've discovered that we didn't have the right to, if we wanted to rebrand Quick Quack to Splash and Dash, we wouldn't be able to because there was already a Splash and Dash in Texas. And so kind of helped to make the decision, but we also did a kind of a poll to friends and family and said, what do you think about this name? I mean, we honestly were just like, this is silly and stupid and like a yellow duck, like. And then we kind of just talked to people, and they're like, they either loved it or hated it, but they're like, it's unforgettable. And so as the marketing guy, I was just like, I think we can really do something fun with this brand. And so we just ran with it. We rebranded in Sacramento. And then, so then we grew overnight. They had 7 locations. We had 6. So we doubled overnight, kind of survived the recession and slowly started growing after that. In 2014, attracted private equity. So meanwhile, the membership model is taking off all over the country, and things are starting to really pick up. And even in Sacramento, we started growing and realizing that the combination of a brand, which didn't exist, like I mentioned, there weren't very many branded car wash companies in the world. So that decade of like 2008 to 2018 was this period of like people almost growing just as fast as they could. But it took a little while for capital markets and banks and private equity to really understand what was happening. And but then that recurring revenue model really was attractive. And so we had several private equity firms reach out to us, and they were looking for what they would call a platform, right? A roll-up play where they would just do acquisitions. And we knew, because we'd done some acquisitions, that acquisitions were hard, and not the best way to grow. We knew inherently that we wanted to have our own branded building in the location that we picked and start from scratch. That ramped way better than an acquisition. But if you're going to grow fast, the pipeline to build took 2 to 3 years, especially in California. It took 3 to 5 years. So we'd identify a piece of property. We might have a car wash there in 4 or 5 years, and that's not fast growth for anybody, right? So we needed this balance of acquisition. But a lot of these private equity firms, they were just interested in just acquisition, just roll up, go. And that's how Mr. grew to be the largest car wash company in the world, in the United States. They're now at over 500 locations, and their private equity firm early on, they just started acquiring all over the country. So that's another thing I think we did well, was we stayed geographically kind of concentrated. We knew in Sacramento, we got this brand now. There's value to the membership, so we're going to keep, building within 2 to 3. At the time, we thought of a 5-mile radius is kind of where we wouldn't build in. As you can tell now, driving up and down State Street, it's about a mile apart now, and the membership model has driven that. But we also realized a lot of times if we don't do it, the competition's going to do it. So we'll build close to them. Really is the smartest for us sometimes, but so Mr. grew, but they couldn't really. So a good example of why we think that strategy worked well for us is when we came to Utah in 2016. So we're 10 years now in Utah, and if you think we started in Utah, then we did okay on our strategy of wanting you to think that we started in Utah, because the competition really goes all in on shop local, which is great. And we had ties to Utah. We ended up acquiring Jason's father-in-law's car wash in St. George. So now we say, really, our first car wash was in St. George. So we're a Utah company, but when we came to Utah, Mr. Car Wash had, I want to say, 17 locations in Utah, which was like, at the time, probably thinking, they're kind of almost at saturation point. Like, why we don't need many more than that. And they would acquire whatever kind of car wash model it was. If it was a full service car wash, they would acquire it. If it was an express car wash, like that's what we call ours, an express car wash. We don't do any detailing, right? No inside. So that's the distinction, is full service will do detailing and wash the inside. They had this now portfolio of hundreds of car washes completely spread out across the country, and mixed model of types of car washes. So we came to Sacramento. We got our first location in Spanish Fork, or Midvale. There was two. One was an acquisition and one was a ground up, and I can't remember which one came first. But anyway, so we started with one or two locations, and they couldn't, and we grew so fast that they couldn't really defend. They're trying to defend 35 different markets around the United States. This Utah at the time was probably our third or fourth market. And so we completely came in. Now we're, they started with 17. We started with 1. I think they might be at 20 now, maybe 21, 22. And we're at 65 locations in Utah. So it's kind of just like, they just couldn't grow fast enough. And that did happen to them in lots of different markets. They went public 3 or 4 years ago. Now they're going private because it just hasn't, they haven't been able to grow. They didn't have the development pipeline in place or the capital structure to be able to grow fast enough to appease Wall Street's appetite for growth. And it's not like they are not good operators. They actually are pretty good operators. They just, because of the need to meet and beat their projections every time, they just haven't been able to be successful, and their private equity partner hasn't really enabled them, because every time the stock price goes up a little bit, then their private equity partner sells off a bunch more and then brings it back down. And so just the nature, one of the reasons we're kind of glad we've avoided going public to this point. So we joined with private equity partner in 2014, and we had turned away a few of them and said, we want to get a right fit. And it's a little bit to my culture point, is we could have jumped at the first 2 or 3 private equity partners that came along, just thrilled, right? That they wanted us to be their platform, regardless of the strategy that they wanted of how we were going to grow. That might have been a disconnect, but it was a lot of times just, are these the kind of people that we want to be associated with? I mean, we got really lucky, I guess, early on. I mean, we were 5, and certainly not that there's a corner on moral, ethical people in the LDS church, but it has so happened that the 5 of us that were founders were all just, besides being, good Christian family-focused people, there was a real sense of just honesty, integrity, and no ego, which, at the time would have kind of been easy, easy for Jason and I, certainly, but even for our partners that already had some successful businesses, we could kind of see that there was no ego in them. And for those 3 partners to have been in business already for 15 years together meant something. And then for them to kind of take us in, be mentors and partners with us. I mean, there were certainly opportunities, as you can imagine, in any growing business, for there to be ego and you're not pulling your weight, and what are you actually contributing to this now? And you're not even working, and you're an equal partner. What's happening here? All those things exist, but they were never an issue. So we got really lucky to find a private equity partner that had very similar, and they weren't LDS, they were Catholic guys, but ended up just being this perfect fit. And they weren't interested in, they'd had a portfolio of not just flipping after 6 years. They had held on to companies for the long term if it worked out. And so they've been partners with us from the beginning. And then 2 years ago, we did another private equity we call it a minority. We still hold majority, not as the five of us, but as the five of us plus our original private equity partner, because we consider them so tightly ingrained into who we are and our culture and our partnership that we're not worried, concerned at all. With us, with them, we have a majority over KKR that's our minority partner, but they brought in a bunch of cash. So we grew 75 locations last year, which was almost double more than we had ever grown previously. This year we're supposed to do 83, and we're at 350 today. So we'll quickly outpace, in our opinion, we're number 3 or 4 largest size in the country right now, and we'll probably be number 1 in a couple of years. And we think like I said, we think we've done a few things right, but the biggest thing we've done right is culture. So let me take 2 minutes and then I'll answer any questions you have. But getting culture right from the beginning is probably one of the most important things you can do as a startup, as a founder, as an entrepreneur. And it can start with your partnership. If you have a partner, I'm a fan of partnerships because I have an amazing one, right? Just good people that we love each other, right? Which is incredible. But partnerships don't always go so smoothly or nicely, right? So starting with a partner, if you're going to have a partner, but then certainly as you grow, bringing people on, we made the mistake that most companies do, especially if you're growing fairly quickly, of needing to just fill a seat. We need a warm body to do this. And whether it's a cashier or somebody on the executive team, the biggest thing that we have learned I feel like we've finally, starting to get right is being slow to hire, not being desperate to hire. Regardless of how desperate you may feel, it's so much worth every dollar or hour spent to get the right person on the team than it is to whatever relief you may feel in the short term. So we had those 6 locations in Sacramento. I was the regional leader, and which meaning I oversaw them. We'd been running stores, and it was such a relief to then not only hire other people to run stores as we grew, but now we were finally at the opportunity where we could hire a regional leader to replace me, so I could go focus full time on the marketing and the branding and the strategy, and so we hired somebody. But we had not sat down and said, who are the kinds of people that we want to hire? Who are the kinds of people that we want our company to be around? We had a mission statement that was a paragraph that nobody ever read, and then we had talked about some values. We actually had 10 values that now we joke that Jason and I, we would always expect all of our team to have memorized all 10 values, and we couldn't remember them ourselves because there was 10 of them. It was ridiculous. And it doesn't mean anything, right? If you just make a list of things or write a mission statement, it doesn't mean anything if it doesn't seep into every part of your business, including, and probably most importantly, hiring. And so we ended up with a regional leader that we were just so thrilled to be like, go, thank you, run those operations for us. He had probably, I don't remember now specifically his experience, he'd probably run a couple of locations for another company, another retail location before. And we were just like, that's more experience than we ever had, so you must know what you're doing. We just let you go. He was with us a year or two, probably 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, we had to let him go on a completely separate issue. But once he left, our we call them store leaders, but our managers all came to us and said, oh man, we're so glad he's gone. He was the worst. And we're like, what? We weren't completely disconnected. We knew these guys. We go to lunch from time to time with them. We were like, why didn't you ever tell us this? And they're like, we were scared to death. He had instituted a culture of this retaliation, fear, discipline, like military kind of chain of command, all this stuff that we're like, we had no idea that this was even, that was our company culture. And we hadn't even had a piece of it, part of it. And so we realized at that point, we had to be very deliberate about what the culture was going to be. And it started from hiring every single person. So at that point, we sat down and said, okay, we got to get this right. We're only going to hire smart, kind, driven. Those were our three easily memorizable. But more than that, we took those three things and we applied them to every part of the business, and said, no matter what we're doing, or if it's hiring, or how we treat customers, or the way that we grow, the way that we treat partners, the way that we do acquisitions, any of it, it's all going to be done smart, kind, and driven. And so we sat down and said, how do we find only smart, kind, and driven people? And it was a challenge. Like, how do you hire for kindness? Like, so we actually developed some questions and some tests that we would do to make sure that we hired only kind individuals. We went out to Chick-fil-A headquarters. They put on a customer experience, customer service, little half-day seminar thing that I don't even think they charge for. It's just really kind of part of their mission as a company to help. You go into Chick-fil-A, it feels different. You work for Chick-fil-A, it feels different. And that's what we wanted. And so we got connected with them, and they invited us out. And we knew that had to dive into every part of the business. And so, we would ask people in an interview, when's the last time you said you were sorry to somebody, and why? That's not a normal standard interview question for a company, right? And you could tell if they're making it up on the spot or whatever. When's the last time you did some service or volunteered in your community? If it was like an executive team member or a higher level team member, we would take them to dinner with their significant other, and we would watch them, how they interacted with the serving staff, how they interacted to any other people. And so we started to get good at, like, oh, we really can kind of hire for kindness. And if somebody happened to slip through, and we had this at the CFO, I probably shouldn't have said that, so strike that from the record. One of our very highest level team members, and he was really smart and really good at what he did, but he could not figure out how to be kind to people. And he had been 20, 30 years in a couple different companies that probably had a culture of, like, just that way, which is sadly, the majority of companies out there. So we had to make the very painful decision of letting him go because of the time and training and knowledge that it took for him to get up to speed on how our business worked. But and so we're like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, and it wasn't like we all along the way and let him know, and he wasn't surprised and he wasn't surprised when